Welcome to the Blessors of Israel Podcast. I'm Matthew Dodd, Executive Director of Blessors of Israel. Honored to be in studio once again with Pastor Rich Jones, the founder and chairman of Blessors of Israel. Well, so much has changed even since we met just last week to talk about the details regarding the war against Iran. Now you have one of their key, actually a couple of their key leaders that were killed in targeted strikes this week. Then you have the development of Israel striking a key structure in Iran, and then Iran responding with strikes against Qatar and then also against Tel Aviv. So very interesting to see what is going on development-wise. When it comes to the Israeli strike against Iran, President Trump, initially there were statements that the United States was in support and coordinating with Israel. And then later, as of yesterday, Trump comes out and says, no, I did not authorize this. But in fact, if Iran does retaliate again against Qatar, then we're going to pull the full force of the United States against Iran.
You're talking about the gas fields.
The gas fields, that's right.
Yeah.
South Pars gas fields.
Right. Going back to our last podcast, we were talking about the goals that the U.S.-Israel coalition had to try to achieve in Iran. And we talked about, I think one of their key goals was regime change. And I think we discussed then that the likelihood of that was not high. And I think now that we've prosecuted this for a while longer.
Almost 3 weeks now.
Right. That is even more remote. The possibility of that is not high. And I think at this point, in fact, I think what we discussed then was that the only achievement would be to knock them down a lot, but that would really be about it. There wouldn't be a lot of other accomplishments from this war. That is what we're seeing.
It is exactly what we're seeing now. There were recent assessments that came out yesterday, both from Israel and the United States, saying there is the potential here, if they keep striking as they are against Iran, targeted-wise, that there is the possibility for the people to rise up. But the problem that I see is back in January when you had the protests.
Right.
Now, we've watched these numbers in terms of how many people were executed by Iran, how many people killed. Was it 10,000, 20,000? Now I'm hearing upwards of over 40,000 people.
Right.
And so, rightly so, the Iranians are waiting for this regime to be fully decapitated in order for them to rise up. And so, like you, I'm really not sure. They're still striking back. Iran's still striking back. Are they as coordinated? No. Are they as effective as they were in the past? No. But they still are, especially with the Strait of Hormuz, creating a lot of concern. Yeah. And I think what I'm seeing more importantly, economic turmoil that is impacting the rest of the globe.
Well, okay, we were talking about the U.S.-Israel coalition and their goals. What is Iran's goal? Their goal right now is to punish this coalition such that they would never want to do this again, right? This is the idea.
Yeah.
And so the Strait of Hormuz is the choke point of oil in the world, and if they can control that by essentially stopping shipping, they will have the economy of the world held hostage.
And as of last night, after these strikes by Israel and then retaliation by Iran that struck Qatar, and you're talking about 17% of LNG that for the next 3 to 5 years
of the world
is out for the next 3 to 5 years. $20 billion a year worth of income that is gone because of that strike.
But the result or the consequence to the world economy is the critical point.
Exactly.
Because, this world economy is fragile anyway. And so it would not take a lot to tip it over the edge. And I think we are facing it right now. That if this does not get resolved in the next, a month, let's say.
Well, that's why the European Central Bank came out today saying, hey, we have to readjust our forecast.
That's right.
Inflation's going to be going up.
That's right.
And potentially very high. And we're also going to see the world economy in terms of trade diminished. So this is having a ripple effect through the asymmetric warfare that Iran is pulling right now. They are effective, and a lot of people are concerned, and that's why you saw oil upwards of 120 earlier today. It
So-
came back down. Now it's about 107, but nevertheless, that was because of Trump's comments in particular to calm things down.
So, how does Iran win? Iran wins by surviving.
Exactly. That's all they have to do.
All they have to do. And if they can control that Strait of Hormuz to the point that America comes to the table and says, let's negotiate. Of course, they'll put on a bluster front.
Yeah.
But that is what is going to happen.
You know what's interesting to me is that President Trump then called upon the NATO allies when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, not only NATO, but also China.
Yes, which you know the answer to that.
Right.
I mean, right before this whole thing went down, they were going to sell Iran hypersonic missiles to attack our ships.
Right.
So, but my point is, then you had the allies balk at the suggestion. Trump wasn't pleased at that. Now they're coming back. Okay, well, we're going to reconsider this, and you know, we will give you that moral support that you may need. But they haven't promised any assets.
No, and the truth, of course, is that Strait of Hormuz is very difficult to control.
Sure is.
You know, it would take literally one guy on the shore with a drone submarine or a drone boat, right? Very little. Really, the only way to truly control it is to create some kind of buffer.
Yeah.
And that's going to take troops on the ground.
And that's what there has been discussion in regards to Karj Island.
Right.
And the United States bringing in a force to control that.
Well, and I think Karj Island, of course, if those who are not aware, is really the central point by which Iran exports really all their oil.
90%.
Right. So if you control Karj Island, you have controlled the chokehold of Iran. So this is economic warfare. This is really all it is now. For example, why is Iran attacking these bases in these other surrounding Arab Muslim nations, right?
Yeah.
Because they want to, again, economically bring disaster. I mean, they've already experienced disaster. What they're saying is, let's all go down this ugly road together.
But I think they're also hoping that by others feeling the financial pinch, that they will levy the United States, come against the United States and say, now you need to turn this off. You need to end this thing right now.
Which is...
It's unsustainable. And then the other reality is you have the midterm elections coming up.
That's right.
And I think there's a lot of pressure there.
That's
now, recent polling showed 83% of the GOP strongly supports Trump right now. But when it looks at another polling by Reuters came out earlier today, only, I think, 11% of independents and 6% of Democrats agree.
Right.
And it's the independents, obviously, that the GOP would be most concerned about.
That's right, because that's what's going to sway this country. And so you are facing now a disaster when it comes to the midterm elections if this thing does not get settled.
Well, and it's going to impact our own economy now.
Exactly.
And that's it. I mean, when the cost of oil goes up
Everything,
globally,
everything's affected.
those prices are going to be driven here, and that's going to impact the bottom line on every front. Everything's going to become more expensive.
Exactly right. And so the incentive is now pressuring U.S.
And this is the way through asymmetric warfare. They're doing just that.
And so this, I think this could have been predicted, right? This could have been played out.
Everyone knew,
right?
The Strait of Hormuz was the pinch point.
In a war game, you got to, you know, Scripture actually says, right, before you encounter an enemy, make sure that you've calculated your assets to make sure that you can handle this. And now, can they defeat Iran? Oh, they had Iran on their knees in, a day, 2 days? I mean,
what they've done, you know, and kudos to our armed forces and to Israel.
Yeah.
What they've done, they've said, and I think many would agree, have exceeded any type of forecasting whatsoever. It does cause a question, though, in regards to the Strait of Hormuz. That's one area that just doesn't make sense to me.
And that's the one area that Iran knew was their card.
Yep.
I was going to say Trump card, but that's not the right thing to say.
It depends on who you're talking to.
But no, it's their one leverage point. It's the great leverage point. It is a massive leverage point. That control is the world economy by the throat. That's how.
About 25% of the oil right there. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that Israel yesterday also struck the Caspian Sea, an Iranian base there. And that was where they had access to Russia. And that's where they were receiving things from Russia, and Russia was receiving things from them. And so that is an interesting development, how they expanded into that region as well. First time ever in the war.
That's interesting. Of course, it's escalation.
Absolutely.
What we are seeing right now is escalation. We really did not want to see this, right? The idea was short, quick, in, get out, be done. And that was what they intended. That's what they wanted.
So where was the miscalculation?
I think the miscalculation is that there would not be quick regime change, that they were going to actually be very difficult to get rid of. They thought, we take out 40 leaders, it's done.
40 leaders, 40 seconds, 40 bombs. That's what Israel said.
It didn't work. And now what? Now, if they control the Strait of Hormuz, now what? They literally have the economy of the world by a chokehold. And it is now, I know the bluster is out there, but it's now incumbent upon this side, the U.S.-Israel coalition, to negotiate something, and they're going to come out of this with a deal. I'm just telling you, I think
Iran's going to come out with a deal.
They're going to come out with a deal. They're going to get some kind of.
Well, they're the ones who are saying we're not going to say when the end of the war is until the end of the war doesn't happen until we say it's done.
That's right.
And that's what they're going to continue to do.
Because they're going to continue holding the world's economy hostage until they have extracted such pain and that's what they're trying to do. They want to recalibrate the estimation so that no country will ever think about this again.
And the world is hurting when they're pulling from the global reserves, and the U.S. is also throwing in some of our reserves as well to keep that market, keep those prices down. But when you're looking at a global scope of things, those even just pulling from those reserves is not going to last for very long.
It is not. And Iran's goal is
it's really a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
And Iran's goal is $200 a barrel oil, right? And that would
what would that do to the United States and the rest of the world?
Crash the economy.
It would.
Absolutely crash the economy. Cannot be sustained. I mean, it could be sustained for a week, 2 weeks, but months? No. The economy of the world is too fragile.
Yeah.
It would take very little to push it over, and we are right now facing a very important crux point. Turn this thing around or it's going to get ugly.
When it comes to war, I've heard it said there's a law of unintended consequences that comes in, and I'm sure this is one of those areas where, and before the war, we were talking about the BRICS alliance of nations, and what did they want to do? They wanted to throw off the shackles of the West, of the United States and the U.S. dollar. Interestingly enough, this is actually having a kind of a boomerang effect.
Right.
In terms of potentially what it may do to our U.S. economy and world economy.
That's right, and it's strengthening the coalition against us. The coalition of China, Russia, Iran. I mean the what I used to call the Axis powers are going to get stronger. They're farther and farther and farther away from the middle.
Asia Times came out today saying China is not being impacted nearly as much as people suspected when it comes to this war right now.
Though
they were fragile to begin with.
They were.
And they depend so much on that, but it's interesting to see what they had to say.
I don't know. It's hard to make sense of that because there's a lot that comes out of China that you can't trust.
It's true.
I think that they get way more oil out of that part of the world than pretty much anybody else.
But they also have Russia feeding them as well.
Well, that's true.
And so you're not going to have, you're going to have an impact with, basically a lot of the imports for exports for Iran were going to China. That gets cut off. So Russia, Putin becomes the benefactor of that.
That's right, and that feeds his war machine. Although, of course, the Shahed drones are being cut off from Russia. In fact, I think Russia is sending some back. That's making it harder for Russia to prosecute their war against Ukraine. That's another interesting factor here. There's a lot dynamically happening in the world right now. We are on the edge of a very, very important turning point.
Yeah.
And so we have to watch very carefully what's next.
I'm so grateful we have the Word of God.
Ooh.
Right now I'm teaching a study for the women here at the church, and we're going through the book of Daniel. And you see over and over again in the book of Daniel, the several themes. Number one, how God is sovereign over all. He's eternal. He's in our past, present, and future. Everything is an eternal now to him. So he knows our tomorrows.
Right.
The future doesn't catch him off guard. The raising up of certain leaders doesn't frighten him because he's the one who raises them up and brings them down. Nations come and go, empires come and go, but God is sovereign over all. It also talks about how believers will go through difficult times. Mm-hmm. And it may appear for a season that evil is going to win, but ultimately God will settle all accounts. And I think it's very reassuring to know that this hasn't caught God by surprise. He's still on the throne. He's still in control. But as Christians, what posture must we take right now in terms of prayer? I mean, there's also a rise even within conservative movements, conservative groups against Israel. We're seeing more and more of this, anti-Semitism. We used to think, well, that's predominantly in the left-leaning circles, socialist and communist circles. Now we're seeing a surge of that within the right as well. So what are your thoughts in regards to navigating this? How can we pastor our brothers and sisters in terms of navigating these days?
Well, of course, the scripture tells us, right? Be on the alert, watch, and pray. This is what the Lord Jesus himself said in preparation for the latter days. Be very watchful, which is why we do what we do here at Blessors of Israel. We want to watch, we want to inform, but as you brought up, pray. We need to pray for Israel, for the peace of Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but we need to pray that this right now, this battle, this conflict resolves. Now, God is sovereign, God is on the throne, and he has written the end before the beginning. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we are called to pray, and God uses the prayers of his people. And so we need to be in prayer that this will resolve. And I think particularly let's resolve it quickly, because if this goes on much farther, it's going to require boots on the ground. And the price is going to be very high.
I agree.
And it's going to take way too long. And so I think, frankly, it's hard to say it, but now's the time to make a deal. It's that much of an issue.
But how does Trump do that?
And save face?
When the stated goal was something else.
Well,
it'll be far from what you'd have to agree to.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a way to frame it. There's always a way to, save face.
And at times it seems like he's been teeing it up for that.
Right.
But then he'll back away.
But at the same time, reality is that the world's economy is in the balance. And so now is the time to be thoughtful and to find a way to get out of this thing. It will not end the way you wanted it to end, so give up on that end.
But you'll still have a regime in place.
And we knew that.
So how do you manage and monitor that?
The idea
definitely don't have the UN coming in because they're not going to do a good job.
Well, I'll give you an analogy, and that's Gaza. Okay, so Gaza was knocked down to a fraction of what it was. Are they still there? They are still there.
They sure are.
And are they rebuilding? They are rebuilding. Will we do this
Actually,
again?
the Board of Peace agreed today on a format for rebuilding just today.
They're going to rebuild it, and they're going to put a lot of money into Gaza, but Hamas will still be in control. They're not going to give up their weapons. So what did we accomplish? Well, what we accomplished was to knock them back so that it takes a long time. I think that's really the only strategic gain here from Iran. We knocked them back so that it's going to take a long time to rebuild. But now they're even more incentivized.
I agree.
To get that atomic program done.
Yep.
So, yeah, it bought some time, you might say, but we're going to face it again.
I think it reinforces that mentality, that paradigm that they have.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why it hasn't been successful in the sense of regime change, because I don't believe we understood just how deeply entrenched they are, and how motivated they are, and how welcoming they are, even to dying for the sake of the Iranian cause.
Now we're hearing, of course, turmoil inside the Iran, and who's actually leading and how much power is it. That's all part of the fog of this whole mess, right? But at the end of it all, what has been accomplished is knocking them back so far that it will take them a long time to rebuild. However, they will have an effect, and that is they will have taught the world a great lesson. You mess with us, we have the ability to choke the world's economy because we control the Strait of Hormuz.
They will say we defeated the great Satan.
That's right.
They will say that.
Absolutely right. And they will have proven something to everybody that everybody will think carefully, because if they control the strait, they control the economy of the world.
And again, going back to Ezekiel 38 and 39 before we wrap things up, you can see how them being knocked down will give them a singular focus to rebuild back and ultimately take out that aggression, that anger, that fury on Israel once again.
Right, because what we see in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is that Persia or Iran absolutely has a tremendous impact, bearing on the latter days, along with Russia, of course, and other nations, interestingly.
And Turkey.
And Turkey. And the Arab nations, as we've pointed out before, stand by. Now, that kind of speaks to the Abrahamic Accords, the relationship that this coalition actually is building with the Arab states, that they would actually not necessarily fully engage, but stand back. But now Israel is going to face a very strong coalition, Russia. Now we see China, Iran, very likely Turkey, which is an interesting component because they're in NATO.
They are.
That's a whole other topic. But we know that they will be involved.
In fact, many people believe Turkey, Erdogan, they're positioning them. It's the day after, like day after Hamas, day after in Gaza. He's positioning himself to come on in.
And at some point, Egypt will start having a bearing. And so, again, watch, stay in the alert, pray.
But don't be afraid.
Absolutely right.
God's still on the throne. But I couldn't agree with you more. Well, thank you for your time today, Pastor Rich, and I want to thank you for joining us as well. We want to make sure, especially for those who are joining us for the very first time, that you understand the mission and the vision for Blessors of Israel. So I'd like to encourage you to visit our website at www.blessors.org. That's Blessors with an ORS.org. When you go to our homepage, there you'll learn about the mission and the vision of Blessors of Israel. Then I'd like to have you click on the box that says Newsroom. When you go to our newsroom, there you'll see our podcast. You'll see curated news concerning Israel and the Middle East. I tell you what, when you go to that newsroom, you'll discover news from around the world concerning Israel and the Middle East that you're just not going to see in any one source like this. It really is amazing what we've put together there. In addition, you'll see original articles with the biblical perspective. By the way, if you haven't done so already, make sure you like this podcast and subscribe to the channel that you're currently watching. Make sure you tell your friends, your family, people you go to church with about Blessors of Israel. It's so important in these latter days for the church to understand the importance of supporting Israel, standing with Israel in the latter days. Other thing I'd like to have you do is make sure you follow us on Facebook, X, and Getter. We appreciate your prayers and your financial partnership as we build this new and important ministry. Remember, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Shalom, shalom.